Hello, my sweet ducklings. Welcome back to another episode of Janine Between the Lines, Literature and Lifestyle for Leisure. It is I, your host, Janine, and today I bring you the second installment of A Little Women Empowerment, but part two, a big old chunk of chapters that will be the concluding half of Little Women. If you haven't checked out the first episode, it's there. Just go ahead and click on my profile and check that one out before you listen to this one. Or you could just listen to this one and then part one. The world is your oyster. I'm just here talking in it. So, just want to quickly... a plane. Just want to thank you guys for tuning in. Stay tuned to take a listen to some quotes, some insight, and some excerpts that I thought were pretty freaking cool in this book. So thank you again for listening. Stay tuned. I hope you guys enjoy. So before I dive straight into part two, I thought it was important and fun to kind of go over the notable responses and questions that I got from part one of the Little Women series. So Ina and Isa collectively made a comment that in terms of the question that I posed of what was the hallmark or keystone moment that, feminism as a movement started in their head. And while I said free the nipple movement, theirs apparently was Miley Cyrus. So that time period where Miley Cyrus kind of had her Britney Spears moment, the We Can't Stop, her Bangers album, and Wrecking Ball, when she was kind of making that mark on the world. And it's crazy because Ina brought it up to me and she said, that might have been very, very, very important now, because can you imagine if somebody did the same things that Miley did 5 years later, aka 2018, it wouldn't get as much lashback. Is that a word? As much negative attention, because we're liberated. There's so much more acceptance than there was back in that 2012, 2013 era, which is crazy because my Free the Nipple movement and Miley's era was all 2012, 2013. Not only that, but Ina and Isa also brought up to me that Lena Dunham, she was a star in the HBO series Girls, which also came out in 2012. Shame on me, I've never really done much research on this. I used to see ads on my Comcast for the HBO series before, but I did a little surface Google research, and apparently she was the poster girl for white liberalism, which is pretty freaking cool. In the show, from what I remember from what they said, she was all, a big proponent of body positivity. She didn't give two rats' booties about what men think about her. And I guess that kind of foreshadowed the era that we're in now. So I thought that time sequence was pretty cool and how we thought of the same things. The next response that I wanted to bring up is from a very good friend of mine. Her name is Ashley, and she had a comment in reference to Aunt March and her degrading comments at Meg when she was speaking of and defending her acceptance of John and the fact that he was low in status, low in income, and ultimately wanted to marry him for love and nothing else.
I'm the same way. I felt exactly like that going into dating Jeremy. I didn't care about necessarily the amount of money. I just want to know, are you someone who is willing to work hard for things, and are you basically not lazy? And if so, then that's the kind of man that I want to marry. If you're someone who is just lazy and sits around and makes excuses while I'm working hard, that's not really a person that I'm going to respect and want to spend the rest of my life with. So I totally get the side of like, don't marry someone for the money, but marry someone for their ambition and for their work ethic and their personal values, because I think that's a valuable thing.
I don't think I could have put it in better words myself. I was reflecting on part 1 again and the whole situation, and I was thinking to myself, I think that Meg felt this way about John. And the reason why she overlooked the status and the money and the who he knew and everything of that nature, because John loved her and was willing to work for her. He was willing to wait to be able to provide for both of them as a married couple. He had the motivation and the ambition. And I don't think Meg would have felt the way she did about him if these things weren't true. If John was just confessing his love to her with no basis or no plans of how he would take care of her and all this other stuff that Aunt March was implying, then she wouldn't have been attracted to or probably wouldn't have accepted. So what Ashley said, being able to show that you have something that you're working towards, and he was working towards those goals to be with her and to be able to take care of her. So that was a really great comment to me. Thank you, Ashley, for listening and responding. My final response that I wanted to include is a recording from my brother, who poses a pretty interesting question that I kind of wanted to bring up in the first place in part 2.
All right, so now I got a question. I'm still listening. But what do you think of all the, women saying that chivalry is dead? Do you think that stuff is still going on? Do women still want guys to be old-fashioned and stuff like that? Or is all of that kind of changing around now? That's a pretty legit question. Heck yeah.
What a weirdo. You could tell he was extremely proud of that question. But truth be told, that question was kind of at the top of what I wanted to cover for episode 2. So you get a small amount of kudos, J.E. Thank you for your question. Again, truth be told, I read all of part 2 of Little Women, and it was hard for me to glean my response from the happenings in part 2. I couldn't really get a grasp on how I felt on it, and the rest of the content didn't tie into how I feel about chivalry and quote-unquote old-fashioned love or dating. So I just wanted to touch on it based on my personal experiences. I don't think chivalry's dead. I don't. I think men possess the ability and the knowledge to be chivalrous. And whether or not they want to put that energy or those actions forth towards a woman is up to them. It's really subjective because it also depends on how you define chivalry. Are we talking buy the woman flowers, pick her up on the first date, at her parents' house? How cute. Oh, what else is chivalrous? Paying for dinner on the first day, not kissing her on the first date. What else? Sweeping a woman off her feet and making women faint because you're doing these irresistibly charming things. Is that chivalry? I think it is. I don't think that's dead. I think a lot of men possess that. They do. It's just a matter of if they want to bring it to life and, do that towards women, because that is rare. When you say, so that brings me to the next question. Do women still want guys to be quote unquote old fashioned? And is that changing? Yeah. I think when it comes down to it, like, women want, generally, if we're talking love, if we're not just talking about lust or physical longings, when it comes to real love, the love that, makes you want to marry someone or be with someone for the rest of your life, I think that women do want the same things. And that's kind of like old-fashioned love, I guess you could say. How you get there, that's what I think is changing. I think that society, social media, and technology has really changed how women and how men court women and how men ask for what they want and how people have conversations. And you don't just have conversations on the phone anymore, and you don't connect with people the same way as you would back in that era, I guess. So I actually want to know, ladies, women that are listening, do you still want guys to be old-fashioned? What does old-fashioned even mean? What do you think chivalry is dead? Or do you think that this era and this generation has completely switched around how people navigate romance in 2018? So the first part I wanted to talk about is kind of like a two-parter because it deals with Amy and Joe. They're from the chapters Artistic Attempts and Literary Lessons. And these two parts really struck home for me because as I finished the book, I just realized how much I identified with Amy and Joe. I feel like I'm a mixture of both of them. So just as a precursor, the part that I'm about to read, it's, for some background, for those who haven't read the book, Amy is one of the sisters. In the beginning, the author would always talk about how she wasn't the prettiest. She was very insecure about her nose, and she had an accident with her nose that made her insecure, but it seemed that Louisa May Alcott painted the picture that regardless of her appearances, she was probably one of the brightest and most charming out of all of them. She could flirt well. She knew how to talk to people. But her dream is to be an artist. And in the beginning of Artistic Attempts, there's this excerpt. And I'm going to just read a little bit of it. So basically, in the second page of the chapter, Louisa May Alcott talks about Amy having a mania for sketching in the mountains. So what she did was she basically sacrificed getting sick. She said she caught endless colds sitting on damp grass to book a delicious bit. She sacrificed her complexion floating on the river in the midsummer sun. People don't like to be tan those days. And got a wrinkle over her nose trying after her points of sight, or whatever the squint and string performance is called. If genius is eternal patience, as Michelangelo confirms, Amy had some claim to the divine attribute, for she persevered in spite of all obstacles, failures, and discouragements, firmly believing that in time she should do something worthy to be called high art. I love that. When I read that, I was like, dang. I highlighted the whole page, and my sticky note says, this whole darned page, especially the last paragraph, absolute dedication to your mother effing craft and perfecting your craft. Regardless of how Mrs. March focused on shaping her daughters to be worthy to be married and to be able to work in a home, and how much she instilled those values and how important that was, I'm really happy that she let her daughters pursue their creative endeavors too. same with Joe. The next part that I'm going to read, it comes back to how Joe, who's a writer, so both of them have different art forms, but she's just as dedicated, but just a little bit crazy. Like, I read this part and I was like, that's probably something that I would do. So this is what it says. It said, every few weeks, she would shut herself up in her room, put on her scribbling suit, and fall into a vortex, as she expressed it, writing away at her novel with all her heart and soul, for till that was finished, she could find no peace. Basically, her scribbling suit was an all-black, they call it a pinafore. She put on an all-black hat, and then just so when she's writing ink, it wouldn't stain when she had to wipe it down or anything like that. And her family, who would watch in and pop in for a distance, she would run away up to the attic, and they say, "Does genius burn, Joe?" They did not always venture to even ask this question, but took an observation of the cap and judged accordingly. So if the cap was like low on her forehead, that means she was doing good, she was on to a new idea, and there was a lot of hard work going on. But if it was almost fully off, or if it was on the floor, then she was exasperated, and they knew not to bother her. Do not touch that bear. That's basically what she said. At such times, the intruder silently withdrew, and not until the red bow was seen gaily erect upon the gifted brow did no one dare address Joe. She did not think herself a genius by any means, but when the writing fit came on, she gave herself up to it with entire abandon, and led a blissful life, unconscious of want, care, or bad weather. And then it goes on, she called it one of her attacks. And I feel that, Joe. Like, whether I'm working on creative things for the podcast, or right now I'm in a study mode, like, I hold myself up, and if I'm on a roll, like, I can't be bothered, or you might get, like, cut by my eyes. But I don't mean it in, a malicious way or anything. It's just, I feel you, Joe. Don't poke the bear when we're in the thought process. But I think that that's really cool. Like, Amy and Joe kind of have their own little thing going on. And at the end of the artistic attempts excerpt that I read, it kind of goes into Amy's personality, and it says this: she was learning, doing, and enjoying other things, meanwhile, for she had resolved to be an attractive and accomplished woman, even if she never became a great artist. Here she succeeded better, for she was one of those happily created beings who please without effort, make friends everywhere, and take life so gracefully and easily that less fortunate souls are tempted to believe that such are born under a lucky star. Everybody liked her, for among her good gifts was tact. She had an instinctive sense of what was pleasing and proper, always said the right thing to the right person, did just what suited the time and place, and was so self-possessed that her sisters used to say, if Amy went to court without any rehearsal beforehand, she'd know exactly what to do. Who do you guys think of when you hear that description? Everyone strive to be an Amy. I mean, no, that's not correct, but I just read that and I feel like I want to be that way. I feel like I part of those, when she says, the whole thing, I guess. I don't want to, I'm like humble bragging. Yeah, that's totally me. No, like, I think that a lot of my friends could testify that part of that lines up with my personality. I don't always say the right thing to the right person, but I think that I have an instinctive sense of what was pleasing and proper, like, reading the mood and kind of one of those happy beings who please without effort. I think that I bring that kind of energy to wherever I am, and whoever I'm with, for that matter. Yeah. Jo is a little bit of the opposite. She's a little more prickly. But that prickly part, our prickly parts parallel perfectly. Oh my gosh, what's that called? Alliteration. I was about to call it an onomatopoeia. What is wrong with me? I love those parts. But I think that creativity and that drive that they have transcends to all of the aspirational people, young people today that, want something more and don't have that hard work ethic in them. So it says, like, Amy, she knows that she wasn't the best. She knew that, she would try to be like a great woman, but her artistry was something that she was willing to work on, and she was willing to like sacrifice and dedicate lots and lots and lots and lots of her time and money, the money that she did have from her earnings. It would go towards her little trip that she wanted to do, her little field trip with her friends on like an artistic venture. Like, that was all for the sake of her goal for high art. No spoilers ahead. Well, yeah, spoilers, you're already listening. Like, of course she didn't like achieve exactly what she wanted in this artistic sense. But plans change, goals change, and I think what just matters is that, kind of like what we mentioned before, like, as long as you're showing that you have that ambition and you're willing to work towards something, that's extremely admirable. And that's why I love Jo and Amy in these instances. They're such hardworking little, like, not even little girls at this point. They're young ladies at this point. I think around 18-ish, 18 to 20-ish. Those are the ages of both of them right now. And I read that and I was like, dang, they're working that hard. And in the climate that they're in, I was just really happy that they were supported, and they never let their dreams die regardless of what was going on around them. And I thought that was a really cool part. So I knew going into recording part 2 that I had to. It was imperative that I include an in-depth analysis of what unfolded between Teddy and Jo. Teddy is Lori, by the way. I'll stick to Teddy for now. Oh, guys, I didn't expect that. My heart. So many feelings. And I just thought that was important. And I was like, that's what made me do the switch up on, like, the focus of what would be the focus of this episode, because there's so much about that dynamic of Teddy and Jo and Teddy's feelings. It hit home with me so hard, like that feeling of like his first love and everything of that nature. Are you guys like picking up on my phrases now? I think I say everything of that nature a lot. And I've said truth be told a lot too. But guys, okay, so this is how I'm going to start it. I didn't think that this would be how it was going to be, okay? But I need to take you through like how everything unfolded, chapter by chapter. Again, a small synopsis, but it's just, oh man. Poor Teddy. Of course, it ends happy, but there's just so much that I can relate to. Like, he went through all the stages of, like, emotions when it comes to your first love. And there was so much that my heart hurt so bad in the best way possible. I didn't think that Little Women would have this effect on me. But You know, that's what books do, man. That's what books do. So, it all starts... So many planes today, guys. It all starts... So, again, another... like, background. So, Teddy is a man who the Marches, the whole family, all the girls have known since they were children. They were next door neighbors, and they got extremely close. And he was closest to Joe because Joe was the tomboy. They'd spend most of their time together, and you know, like, they started to grow up, and Louisa May Alcott started writing and putting in subtle hints that Laurie might have been getting interested. So, you know, like, when you're around someone for a long time, like, you start to grow affection for someone, and your perspective of them kind of changes. So, it starts when at Meg's wedding, and there's this quote. It says, Laurie's talking to Joe, "You won't give anyone a chance. You won't show the soft side of your character, and if a fellow gets a peep at it by accident and can't help showing that he likes it, you treat him," what does it say? "You treat him as Mrs. Gummidge did her sweetheart, throw cold water over him, and get so thorny no one dares touch or look at you." Hold on, guys. My dog keeps walking in and out of the room, and I can't handle it. So basically, Laurie's telling Joe, because they're in like a little romantic environment right now, he's starting to feel some type of way because she's all dressed up, and Joe pretty much denies him. She's like, "No." Turns her head. She's like, "I don't like that sort of thing. I'm too busy to be dealing with all that kind of stuff." And then at the end, he's like, whatever his feelings might have been, Laurie found a vent for them in a long whistle and a fearful prediction as they parted at the gate. "Mark my words, Joe, you'll go next." So, like, picture, like, she's walking away, and he's starting to feel his feelings heat up. He's like, "Oh, yeah, Joe? Well, you're going to be next." So, the wedding passes. And, Meg has her baby, keeps going on, and basically what happens in the chapters to come is Beth, the sickly sister, she's declining greatly. They don't really know why at this point, but Joe gets it in her head that, you know, Laurie has spent so much time with them, like with their whole family, and Beth turns into like a more gentle person, and Laurie changes, like he's less wired and he's more caring when he's talking to Beth because like their friendship is like a very tender one as opposed to Joe and Teddy. Like they have like, you know, they fight a lot. That's kind of how they've been their whole lives. So as they're growing up, Teddy's in college. Teddy is, you know, he's a charming guy. The way that the author describes it, like, you know, he flirts around, he's starting to drink. He's in college, you know, and then, but Joe is still his constant. Like, he goes to her when he's having girl problems, or he goes to her to tell his like vulgar stories, and she's always there for him. I think the phrase that she uses is like, not the phrase, but the situation that I picture from the book is like they sit on the couch and pretty much Teddy lays his head on Joe's lap and he talks about like everything, and she's always there to, you know, tell her day about, or tell her about his day. And yeah, so that's like a super close relationship. I don't blame freaking Teddy for catching feelings, but Jo got it in her head that, like, she sees Beth, like, giving him looks and, like, staring at him, or she convinces herself that Beth has feelings for Teddy, and she's like, oh God, oh no, like, I can't do this. Because while that's going on, the whole family is starting to notice, like, oh, I think Teddy's starting to like you more. Jo, I think Teddy's, like, he's gonna get down on one knee soon, blah, blah, blah. But Jo doesn't want any of it. Jo is like, zero romance. No, I don't want it. I don't want to break up my family. Marriages stink. Like, that's her stance on it. So when she finds out, or when she convinces herself that Beth has a crush on Teddy, she goes 0 to 100, and she's like, oh God, like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of their way. Maybe Teddy can eventually have feelings for Beth. Maybe they'll get married. Maybe that'll heal what has going on. And what she thinks is the noble thing to do is leave. So she has a plan to go to New York and leave so that hopefully she will be out of the picture. Teddy and Beth will be spending more time together. They'll fall in love. Beth will be okay. They'll all be happy. And, you know, all of this in the back of my head as I'm reading, I'm like, you know what? Jo is in complete denial. She's just saying this, but, like, I thought that they were, okay, well, that's looking into the future too much. But part of me was like, Jo, like, stop denying yourself. Like, why don't you just give it a try? But she doesn't. So she ends up going to New York. And, oh my gosh, I died. So at the end of the chapter, Tender Troubles, she's saying her goodbyes, and she says to Beth, like, oh, please take care of him, okay? And she says bye to Lori, and Lori is like, Lori / Teddy, I hope I'm not confusing you guys. Teddy is like, this is what he says. He says, it won't do a bit of good, Jo. My eye is on you, so mind what you do, or I'll come and bring you home. What? Oh my God, when I read that, like, he saw right through her. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly why he's leaving, or why she's leaving. Dude, I would have been shook. I would have been like, no, I need to leave. Like, I probably would have turned super red. So, onwards we go. The rest of, like, the following chapters is Jo, what's it called? Jo writing them letters from New York. She's asking, like, how Teddy is, how's Beth? And while all that's happening, so Jo is in New York and taking care of, like, a few children for, I think, an aunt of theirs, while she's, like, teaching knitting or something like that. And Lori takes it upon himself, like, Jo doesn't know it, but he's basically cleaning up his act. Apparently he gave up drinking, he didn't date around too much, he grew out his hair, and he was bettering himself so that when Jo came back, he was, like, on and popping, like, he was ready to, like, lock it down, you know? So, holy Lord, this whole chapter, heartache, I have so many sticky notes, guys. There's so many, like, quotes that made me want to die in the best way possible. I was screaming I was in my room reading this, and my heart was beating so fast. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So, chapter, it's called Heartache, and it starts out, this is what happens. You ready for, like, the scoop? So, Lori, like, they're hanging out, right? Lori's like, I'm about to put this in layman's terms. So Lori's like, hey, I need to talk to you. And then she has a feeling that she knows what's going to happen. She's like, no, Lori, don't. She's like, and Teddy's like, no, I have to say it. Like, you got to do it once. I have to tell you at least once. So he basically, and then Louisa May Alcott's like, oh, he's getting choky. Oh my God. I was like, oh God, what's going to happen? So he says, I've loved you ever since I've known you, Joe. Couldn't help it. You've been so good to me. I've tried to show it, but you wouldn't let me. Now I'm going to make you hear. And give me an answer, for I can't go on any so longer. And then Joe's like, oh, I wanted to save you from having to do this. I thought you'd understand if I left. And then he cuts her off. And then he goes, I know you did, but girls are so queer. You never know what they mean. They say no when they mean yes, and drive a man out of his wits just for the fun of it. That's so true. It's so harsh. I just keep, like, thinking back to those tweets I keep seeing. It's like, stop playing with my feelings just because you're bored. And then it's like some guy holding a gun to a girl. Because girls, don't lie. Y'all do that. We do that. Because it's fun. Like, sometimes you get in a mood where you just want to straight up play games. And I know that's not right. And then we get mad at men for doing that to us. Because we don't want the same things. But, like, you know, I get why Lori, like, would say that. So, goes on. He's confessing his love. He's like, you've been way too good to me. How do you expect, like, me not to have feelings for you? So, it goes on, and there's somebody that Joe met. She met, like, this professor while she was in New York, and Teddy gets, like, insecure that, she fell in love with him, but she didn't. And so basically she's trying to reason with Teddy, like, what else did you say? She said, you haven't heard what I tell you. Sit down and listen, for indeed I want to do right and make you happy, hoping to soothe him with a little reason, which proved that she knew nothing about love. And I like that one too, because I was like, yeah, you can't logically reason or settle this with, like, reason, because emotions take over everything at that point, especially for Lori. He's heated, he is confessing his love, and, like, he's not ready to be rejected. There's no way it's gonna happen, like, agreeably. So Joe goes on to say she had this conversation with her mom before, and she brings it up to Teddy, and she's like, no, I agree with Mother that you and I are not suited to each other because our quick tempers and strong wills would probably make us miserable if we were so foolish as to, like, go forward. And the conversation that they had was like, you guys are too much alike. Your personalities won't mesh together. It'll be, like, too much fire. It was way too fire, but, like, it, like, doesn't match up. Like, the puzzle pieces wouldn't fit. Like, if two puzzle pieces that are exactly the same aren't going to fit, like, in a marriage. And I think I agree with that. I've definitely met people, or met, like, people that I was interested in that, like, I consider them, like, oh, you're, like, the guy version of me. And I've had that happen before. And then when you kind of, like, work at the same capacity, or, like, feel things at the same capacity, and sometimes it just doesn't, like, mesh. Like, it doesn't mesh well, especially in, like, conflict and, communication and trying to work things out. Like, I think it's better to have somebody that compliments you. Of course you can have similarities, because what are you gonna, like, talk about? Or when you're, like, way too different from other people, then there's, like, how are you gonna connect? But Lori didn't see that. Teddy didn't see that. And she's like, Teddy, be reasonable. Like, listen to me. Stop freaking word vomiting with your heart. And he's like, I won't be reasonable. Stop telling me to be reasonable. And then he kind of guilt trips Joe a little bit. Like, Grandpa wanted this so much. Like, he knows I'm in love with you. All this kind of stuff. And Joe straight up tells Teddy, like, No more. I don't want to hear any of it. I don't believe I shall ever marry. I'm happy as I am and love my liberty too well to be in any hurry to give it up for any mortal man. Dang, I like clap to that. You go, Joe. You freaking go. But Lori's like, I know better. You think so now, but there'll come a time when you will care for somebody and you'll love him tremendously and live and die for him. You know, like, I know you will. It's your way, and I shall have to stand by and see it. So, while that wasn't, like, the final blow, she basically tells him, oh, I'll always be fond of you, very fond indeed, as a friend, but I'll never marry you. The sooner you believe it, the better for both of us. So now. And then I think that was it. That devastated him. And he goes, you'll be sorry someday, Joe. And it's like walking away. And, oh man, can you imagine? But listen here. What if people these days, around my age, I don't know, let's say like 20s to 30s, what if we were that direct with our feelings and we were that upfront about what we wanted going into a relationship? Or when you're interested in someone, like, hey, I guess that would take the fun out of it, right? That's why people play games. But when we were talking about old-fashioned, like, this is what I consider old-fashioned. Like, laying out what you want, like, telling them how you feel. It takes so long to get to that point. And I think that's what I would want. Like, that's an old-fashioned aspect of, like, love and dating that is kind of gone now. Like, of course, eventually people communicate that, but the confusion that comes prior to that, is that just me? Maybe I'm problematic. Maybe some guys, like, still do that, and, like, it's easy to, like, verbalize feelings. But no, like, people, like, don't know what they want. And then I think that's what confuses, like, men and women. Like, when they get into relationships or if they have feelings for someone, they're like, oh, do we want the same things? Like, they ask themselves, but they don't want to, like, communicate that to the other person in fear of, like, oh, they don't want the same thing. So, like, let me wait it out. Let me feel it out. Let me have some, like, time before I text back. Like, I don't want to look too eager. I don't want him to think I'm not interested. Should we be hanging out every day? Is he talking to other women like that? Like, that part just frustrates me. So what I'm saying is, like, what if we were this direct with people now? That would be a nice little movement. I would like that. I'd be for that. So it goes on, and pretty much Beth wasn't in love with Lori, by the way. If you haven't figured out already, this is a spoilers podcast. So it goes on, and Lori goes overseas, right? And there were these chapters where it's called Lazy Lawrence. And pretty much Lori went overseas, and he got really off track. Like, his heart was aching so bad. He let this, like, that heartbreak just got to him, man. He lost his ambition. He started, he went to Europe with his grandfather because he wanted to get away and hopefully, like, sweat off what just happened with Joe. But, man, that thing takes time. And I felt for him so bad because we've been there, you know? It, like, messes you up. Like, I remember my first, like, real heartbreak. Man, what the heck? How do you like fathom? You can't even, it's not something that can just go away. And there aren't remedies for it that, like, you know, it's like a quick fix. Like, you think spending time with your friends and distracting yourself and, you know, doing other fun things, but then you always have, like, time to sit and think. And Lori was trying to, like, get rid of that, like, trying to bury it, but it didn't really work out. And it just so happens that Amy is also in Europe, right? So he went through a really hard time, and I think the part that stuck out to me the most was the part that stuck out to me the most was how Louisa May wrote out how he got over it. And it was basically what I just said. Like, time. Like, time heals all wounds. And there's a chapter in here called Learning to Forget. And I read this and I was like, dang, you really put needles in my heart, man. So, like, I know we're talking about first love and stuff, and how, you know, when you first break up with somebody and it's like your first, like, real love, you always tell yourself, oh, everyone, like, remembers, you never forget your first love. That will always be in your heart. You'll always feel some way about that person. And then I read this and it was crazy because he said, it says, Laurie thought that the task of forgetting his love for Joe would absorb all his powers for years, but to his great surprise, he discovered it grew easier and easier every day. He refused to believe it at first, got angry with himself, and couldn't understand it. But these hearts of ours are curious and contrary things, and time and nature work their will in spite of us. Laurie's heart wouldn't ache. The wound persisted in healing with a rapidity that astonished him, and instead of trying to forget, he found himself trying to remember. He had not foreseen this turn of affairs and was not prepared for it. He was disgusted with himself, surprised at his own fickleness, and full of a queer mixture of disappointment and relief that he could recover from such a tremendous blow so soon. He carefully stirred up the embers of his lost love, but they refused to burst into a blaze. There was only a comfortable glow that warmed and did him good without putting him into a fever, and he was reluctantly obliged to confess that the boyish passion was slowly subsiding into a more tranquil sentiment, very tender, a little sad and resentful still, but that was sure to pass away in time, leaving a brotherly affection which would last unbroken to the end. Like, isn't that crazy? And it's crazy because it's true. I think we've all gone through that, like, in our generation. Like, let's say you've dated someone for a long time, and, you know, you popped out that L word, and then when you break up, you're like, what the heck? You're in that funk. And then as enough time goes by, do you ever, like, question yourself, like, oh, like, this is starting to hurt less and less and less, and then you're like, did I really, like, love them? Did I really do this? And you kind of, like, you don't miss the feeling of being hurt, but you miss, like, what you had and what you felt with that person. So when he's like, he tried to remember, instead of trying to keep forgetting, like, he tried to bring that feeling back, tried to bring that fire back. And you ever, like, okay, this is bad of me. You know, you guys have done it too, but, like, you know that you're getting over somebody, or you know that the other person is getting over you, and then you hit them with that text. You're like, hey, like, how are you doing? Because there's something about it that you don't want it to die down immediately. You know what I mean? And you're, like, trying to revive it because that, like, gave you so much life before. And I feel like but it's different, it's different for Teddy because he's literally a continent away. So he can't just DM Joe or send her a text like with read receipts on, like, hey, how are you doing, to fire that up or give him that satisfaction of like seeing her again even when these feelings are dying down. So regardless of how much he didn't want to get over him, that time and distance was healing him. And I was like, yeah, that made me like really feel some type of way. And there was more. So basically, there's another quote in this heartache chapter, the learning to forget. It says, it all came about so naturally that no one could complain, and he knew that everybody would be pleased, even Joe. So at this point, he's been spending a lot of time with Amy, which, okay, him and Amy fall in love. And at first I was resentful, but I guess it makes sense. I'll get into that at the end, but basically says, when our first little passion has been crushed, we are apt to be wary and slow in making second trial. So Laurie let the days pass, enjoying every hour and leaving to chance the utterance of the word that would put an end to the first and sweetest part of his new romance. So like when your first little passion has been crushed, so what he defines as his first love, we're more hesitant and slow to try again. Of course, like, Laurie's going to be guarded. People are going to be guarded, like, the second time around. They feel like they know what to do this time. They know what to expect. Like, they're going to, like, have more of a shield and not give it away so freely because they don't want, the heartbreak to happen again. Because that crap is physical, man. What if I did, like, research on, like, what medicines would, like, quote-unquote, heal symptoms of heartbreak, like the chest pain and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, like, it's hard to come back from that, I think. And regardless of how much like you guard your heart or tell yourself that you're gonna do things differently so it'll work out this way, like when you meet somebody who is like the one, I think all of it is like everything gets thrown out the window because your heart's just going to know like what you want. And I think that's what happened with Laurie. So he told himself like, I'm going to take it slow. And I think Amy, even though I was really rooting for Joe, I really thought that when Joe came back from New York and she saw Laurie's improvements, I was like, why not? Why not, Joe? Like, look at him. He's doing all of this for you, making that effort and that ambition and stuff. Like, and you guys would be perfect. Like, you already love each other. But that just goes to show, like, there's so much more to, like, loving someone that way than just having things in common and already like caring about someone. Like, it's so complex, dude. So, you know how I said Laurie and Joe were like the same puzzle piece? I think Amy was the puzzle piece that actually fit him. And that's me trying to convince myself that I supported like Teddy and Amy at the time, but as I finished the book, I saw why they worked. Like, Amy was a consistent, like, lady. She fit his lifestyle very well. And as opposed to Laurie's fiery, passionate, like, I don't want to say hyper, but high-strung lifestyle, like, Amy was a woman that was going to hold him down and bring him back down to earth. She humbled him, like, a very great amount of times. I think Joe's way of humbling Teddy was, like, pushing back and being equally as high-wired and, like, that's why they would clash so much, and that's why they would have fights. But, you know, regardless, she still loved him. She was his best friend. But, yeah, man, like, Amy kind of reeled that in. And Joe was happy about it, which I guess is what matters to me. At the at the end of their Europe trip, Amy and Teddy ended up getting married. And yeah, I know, it was a beautiful thing. It really was. But I really just didn't expect it. And Lori's maturity and just being able to see him go through those times, like, oh man, it just brought back memories. And it's funny because I'm seeing it in a guy's perspective. Not exactly I'm reading about it. They're like a guy's perspective, but it's kind of synonymous, I guess, across genders, right? Girls, guys, do you think that kind of lines up with how you were feeling about, or how you feel about how your first love was? Let me know. Leave me some applause, I guess. Is that the first time I'm asking? I'm surprised with myself. Let me see. Like, at the end, when they come back, it's really sweet. Like, the author really contours or shapes the characters well. I'm losing words, but at the end, it's so cute to me because, and it makes me less, like, resentful, because I was like, Joe and Teddy, I was standing them so hard. No, that's not the word. I was shipping them. So, it's cute because Joe and Teddy's like, I need to talk to you. So they go over to their old couch with, like, their old prickly pillow. It's like an inside joke with the two of them. He tells Joe pretty much, like, I will never stop loving you. Like, it's not that I lost love or that I hold Amy above you. It's just my love for you has altered. And I've learned to see that this is the better way for us. Like, Amy and you collectively have changed places in my heart. And I think this is the way it was meant to be. Like, I'm grateful for the heartache that you gave me. I was a boy then, and I needed time to grow up, and you helped me with that. And I thought that was so beautiful. And even though when I first read it, I was like, yeah, Louisa May, that's not really realistic. Because Joe was, like, all agreeable. Like, yes, I love you. We are man and woman now. Playtime is over. Like, I'll miss my boy, but I shall love the man that you are so much now. Like, we can't be playmates any longer, but we will be brother and sister to love and help one another all our lives. Won't we, Lori? And my first reaction, I was like, yeah, well, not very often do you fall in love with one woman and then you, like, fall for her sister, like, overseas, and then that's, like, okay. But I guess at the time period, that was my first reaction. I was, like, a little bit salty because I was like, no, you belong with Joe. But that's, like, a very optimistic result. That's a very positive ending to, like, that relationship. And not even an ending. It's a positive outcome, which I don't think would happen very often here. I bet that's really rare, because if I was in love for somebody, well, I don't know. Is that a testament to how immature I am? I think, yeah, you could work it out to where, like, I think exes can be friends, but the way that, like, the way that Teddy was like, oh yeah, I still love you, but you're just in a different part than you were before. I'm not the kind of girl that would, like, hold on to that, who would want to hold on to that relationship. But it's different for them, you know? He was, like, a family friend, somebody who was there, like, their whole lives to begin with, and I guess that makes a difference. So it was a happy outcome. It was. But, yeah, the book goes on, and Jo eventually marries the professor that I mentioned in the beginning, the one that she met in New York. And it's cute because he's this German guy. Wow, man, what is his name? I always forget it. Mr. Bear. Mr. Bear. I think it's Bhaer. And he comes back, and, you know, Jo is getting older. She's like, I'm no spring chicken. I think I might want to, like, settle down and have a few babies. But Mr. Bear comes back, and he seeks Jo out, and he confesses his love. And there was a quote to conclude my forlorn love story segment. To conclude it is just this quote from this chapter called Under the Umbrella. I think it's the second to last chapter. And it's Mr. Bear and Jo talking because he has engagements in Europe still. He has to be talking, or he has to take care of some business there. So he says, he has to go, and he's asking Jo if that's okay. So he says, we shall see. Have you patience to wait a long time, Jo? I must go away and do my work alone. I must help my boys first, because even for you, I may not break my word to Minna, which is a little girl he was taking care of in Europe. Can you forgive that and be happy while we hope and wait? And Jo says, yes, I know I can, for we love one another, and that makes all the rest easy to bear. I have my duty and my work. I couldn't enjoy myself if I neglected them, even for you. So there's no need of hurry or impatience. You can do your part out west. I can do mine here. And both be happy, hoping for the best, and leaving the future to be as God wills. And I was like, you know what? Who was I talking about? Who was I talking to when we were talking about long distance? I forgot who it was, but I was like, yes. When I'm half speaking from personal experience, but like when you're working on you and your significant other has things to work on too, like, who was I talking to? I was like, you know, I understand, like, he doesn't want to be in a relationship right now because he's, like, working so hard towards something. Like, I don't want to get in the way. I don't want him to have, like, obligation to, you know, like, have to take me on dates or worry about how I'm feeling. Because, like I said in the first one, like, love can mess you up. Like, your priorities change. Your time allotment has to be divided when you can be devoting to your craft or to what, I don't know, your business or the startup that you're working towards. So I was telling one of my friends, like, yeah, I understand. Like, I wouldn't want to be in a relationship too because there's so many, like, changes going on in his life or her life that, like, I don't want to get in the way. Like, I'm comfortable, like, looking from afar, like, being, like, a support system and, like, cheerleader. Like, you do you, like, go. Like, that's extremely, like, admirable and, like, sexy. That, you know, super hard worker and, like, going places, you know? And then I'm like, yeah, and then if it so happens, like, if the timing is right, then, like, you have no doubt that you would, like, be together, right? And then, I forgot who my friend was, but they're like, yeah, that makes sense, but, like, if you want to be with somebody, then it doesn't matter, like, where you are. If they're working on something else, like, you'll be with them and just them and, like, have that commitment, and that wouldn't even matter. Like, they would still be doing their thing and improving and getting better and working, but, like, the commitment would still be there. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Which is true, you know. But I just thought it was really beautiful, like, how Joe is just like, yeah, don't worry, like, I'll hold it down here. It's gonna be hard, but I'm willing to wait, and all that kind of stuff. So, can you tell I'm in my feels right now? Oh, it was so nice, guys. That was pretty much the conclusion. Like, after that, all of them have little babies, and Mama March is just like, this happiness that I'm able to experience right now is like everything that I could have wished for all my girls. Of course, they missed Beth, who I researched. She never really spelled out what exactly happened to Beth, but she died of scarlet fever. And but all in all, it was a happy ending, and everyone was happy, and that makes me happy. And I'm really glad I got to read that book. It came at a very interesting time in my life, like everything that I could relate to. I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately, so reading that, I was just like, man, that hit home. Let's go, Teddy. I can't believe I related to him so much too. That took me by surprise. What do you guys think? Do you think that, did I ask this already? Are there some similarities about how you felt with your first love? How long did it take you to get over your first love? I want to hear some first love stories, and I want to add it to my next thing. So send me some. I'd love to hear it. All right, everyone. I think I'm going to go ahead and conclude this episode. I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this little series, my two-parter of Little Women. In the future, I'm planning on breaking up books a little bit more rather than just strictly doing a part 1 and part 2, just so I can have more content, and I don't feel like I have to squeeze it into just 2 parts. So look forward to that. The next book, I announced it on Twitter, guys, but the next book that I'm going to be reading, if you guys want to join, it's going to be We the Animals by Justin Torres. So it came out in 2011. Just to read a quick summary, reading from Google. It is a Bildungsroman. Yeah, you bet I had to freaking look that up. A Bildungsroman is a literary genre that focuses on the psychological and moral growth of the protagonist from youth to adulthood, in which character change is extremely important. So, We the Animals is a book, a Bildungsroman about 3 wild brothers of white and Puerto Rican parentage who live a rough and tumble childhood in rural upstate New York during the 1980s. It got wonderful reviews. There is a Sundance movie based on the book, and I'm really excited to read it. So come along with me, everyone. We can read, discuss, dispute, fight, argue, communicate. Simply talk with one another while we're reading together. How amazing would that be? So if you want to join me, I'll be starting that after the next OTT. I'll set a date pretty soon. If you aren't already, follow me on Anchor so we can talk and stuff. Follow me on Anchor. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at JanineBTL, at JANINEBTL. It's in my description too. And you could always email me at JanineBetweenTheLines@gmail.com. I would love to hear stories about your first love and experiences, but I'd also like to take any constructive criticism and thoughts about what you thought about my Little Women series. Remember, the 15th of October, not exactly V for Vendetta worthy, but October 15th, keep your eye out, keep it in your calendar. I've got some low-level excitement. I'm trying to talk it down. I'm trying to not get you guys too excited, just in case it's not as excited as I think it is, but I think it's exciting for me. But October 15th, everyone, put it in your calendars. It's going to be something pretty freaking sensational. Thanks, Anchor, and thank you everyone for listening. I love you all. I can't wait to talk to you guys in the next episode. So, thank you. I love you. Goodbye.